All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving our praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the artists of great millstone, who I learned this truth from, and I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. And today, I just want to do a quick lesson on pretty much this article, that came out, not too long ago about, this guy that was arrested for having, multiple wives, you know. So I'm just going to go into this post, bring out a couple scriptures. Lord willing, this lesson is edifying and straight to the point. And this is from the page Spiritual World on Instagram. It says, Florida man arrested for having 3 wives. None of them knew each other, which having multiple wives is not a crime, according to the Bible. But as we know, here in America, having multiple wives is a crime, which I'm going to bring out a little information on that. So it says Charles Chuck Betsy was arrested for felony bigamy after marrying 3 women, Tanya, Michelle, and Brandy, between 2020 and 2022 in different Florida counties, without divorcing or annulling any marriage. Each wife was unaware of the others, having met Betsy on dating sites, Tinder, Stir, Match.com. The scheme unraveled when Tanya discovered marriage licenses for Michelle and Brandy and county databases and informed Michelle, who reported Betsy to authorities. Suspected of seeking financial gain, Betsy pleaded guilty in May 2025 and received 2 years probation. The wives doubt his apology and criticize Florida marriage license system for lacking cross-county checks, with Michelle advocating a statewide database. And these are clearly the women he married, 3 Edomite women, which again, there's nothing wrong with. But, just like the Apostle Tahar says, we can deal with these different heathen women, but, we shouldn't marry them. But what this Jake did, it was not a crime, But according to, again, us being here in America, being up under this American system, Esau pushes that a man should only have 1 woman. Monogamy is pushed heavily here. He doesn't, accept polygamy, which again, people already, practice polygamy. They just do it the wrong way, I'll say, excuse me, Slakia. Like you'll have, just like we have the term today, baby daddy, right? You'll have a man that'll have, children by different women. Those women that he has children with are technically his wives, especially if he took their virginity, But again, according to, the legal system here in America, having multiple wives is a crime. So real quick, let's get the definition for the word bigamy, right? Because this is what this Jake was arrested for. And this is bigamy. It says the crime of marrying someone while still legally married to someone else. And again, according to the scriptures, there is nothing wrong with a man multiplying wives. He can do that just as long as the woman that he's dealing with doesn't have a man, already. He's in his God-given right to have as many women as he wants. Again, the primary example in the scriptures of a man having numerous women is going to be King Solomon. He had 1,000 women. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines. So 700 Israelite women, which, Israelite women would be our wives, and then the heathen women, concubines, which is just a lesser wife, but they're still wives, but they're just lesser. But again, King Solomon had 1,000 women. He didn't, commit a crime by, having that many women, and this is just what Esau pushes, because he knows that if he would allow, the nation of Israel to practice, polygamy, then we would grow as a nation, because that's in our law, to be fruitful and multiply. But that isn't what he wants, so headed to ChatGPT, and then I asked it, I said, when did monogamy become legal in America? And it said, monogamy has always been legal in Slovakia. Monogamy has always been the legal standard in America. Says when the United States was founded, the nation's laws were based largely on English, common law, and Christian traditions. And, Christian and, the Edomite sense, I'll say, not according to the scriptures, because we know the true Christians would be, the Mashiachim, the followers of Yahweh Shai, it says, which is recognized only one legal spouse at a time, in other words. So again, according to the American standard, if you want to get married, you can only have one wife. And also, there's a group, another Israelite groups that practices this, right? The IOIC, they push this monogamy shit heavily, that you can only have one woman, when it clearly says in the scriptures that, a bishop, is only supposed to have one woman, and that's for a reason, but again, a man that is not a bishop is allowed to have as many women as he wants. And again, man, it's nothing wrong with that. Again, as long as that woman that he's dealing with does not have a man already, he's not doing anything wrong. But again, we know Esau, in his laws, man, he does any and everything to oppress us, because he knows that, if we were to be able to, again, practice polygamy, we would grow as a nation. And on top of that, if our women were in order, and not against us, then, he'd have a problem on his hands, But again, he's turned our women against us, for the most part. And again, he only wants the nation of Israel, or just people in America in general, or men in America, to only have one wife, when, that's just how men were made. We were made to deal with multiple women. We weren't created to deal with one woman, man. It's not possible. I don't care what any man says, we all, notice I said we, because again, that's just in our nature, man. We have the desire to love and be with more than one woman. It's just how the Lord made us. And then you have women out there that say that, oh, well, they can deal with multiple men. It's not the same thing. Once a man deals with you, you can't wash that man off of you. Just like I seen a clip, if a man, does the act with a woman, he can wash her off of him, but a woman can't wash that man off of her, because again, if a man plants his seed in that woman, that man is a part of her forever, That's why women are only supposed to have one man, because again, that, prevents whoredom, confusion. It prevents these things, which Esau, Edom, allows to go on in this society, because again, man, like adultery is heavy, in this current society, because again, you have a lot of women that are wanton, that desire to be with other men. And he allows that, but let a man, try to multiply or deal with multiple women, then that man is looked at as the bad guy. But, again, whoredom is praised here in America, man. That's how this current world, this current society that we're in is backwards, So just finish reading this. It says, from the beginning of U.S. law, late 1700s, marriage was defined as a monogamous union between one man and one woman, which is BS. There are accounts of certain men in the scriptures that may have only had one wife. But again, every man is not monogamous, man. We're polygamous by nature, So it says polygamy was never legal under U.S. federal law. So again, a man having multiple wives was never legal in the U.S., which is just madness. When, again, I'm pretty sure before Edom came over here and Slaughter, Gad and Reuben, that they were still practicing this. They had multiple wives, I'm sure. Even though they were going off, you know, I'm pretty sure that is one custom that they still kept. So it says in the 1800s, the practice of polygamy among some groups, especially early Mormons in Utah Territory, led to conflict with the U.S. government. Congress passed specific laws making polygamy a federal crime, like the Morrill Anti-Bigamy Act of 1862. So again, how was a man having multiple women a crime, man? This is all I'm trying to understand. Like, how was that a crime? Now granted, the women said, they didn't know about each other, which again, you don't need to know about each other. As long as that man is doing what he needs to do to keep you, taken care of, then you shouldn't be worried about any other woman. That's what a lot of you women out there need to just understand and accept, that this is just how men are made. This is how we are created, to deal with more than one woman. You will have weak men out there that can, it's certain guys, it's understandable if certain men only are able to deal with more than one, or only to deal with Slakia. Because, I just want to phrase this right, but, you will have certain men out there that, are only able to deal with one woman. And it's understandable because, again, each woman you multiply unto yourself, you have to take care of them. You can't neglect them. You have to, do your due diligence, make sure that they're taken care of, But, again, you will have, weak men out there that, oh, well, I don't want, another wife and this and this. And they can speak for themselves. But, again, I guarantee you, if you go around and ask 10 men, 10 married men, if they have a desire to have another woman, I guarantee you they're all going to say yes. So I'm just going to finish this up. It says the Supreme Court later upheld these laws in Reynolds versus United States, 1879, ruling that religious freedom did not protect polygamy. So again, it doesn't matter what religion you believed in. Like, I'll take, Islam as far as, the Negro Islams, they'll practice that. Because if I'm not mistaken, these NOI dudes, they'll have like 2 wives or something like that. Excuse me, Slakia. I'm not sure now as far as Ishmael, because we know that's who, is heavy into the Islam, because that's their religion, is Ishmael. I'm pretty sure that they, have anywhere between 2 to 4, if I'm not mistaken, 2 to 4 wives. Which again, there's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't matter, what your religion is, your religious freedom wouldn't protect you from having multiple wives in America. Outside of America, maybe depending on where you are, but here is madness, and you still have to this day certain countries that practice polygamy, like certain, countries in Africa, where you'll have men that have multiple wives, certain countries over there in the East, those different Arab countries where those men will have multiple women as well, and I'm pretty sure, Moab, they may do it still. I could be mistaken about them, I'm not sure. Ammon, I don't think they are, because again, they have a report that, their population is declining because, again, people aren't reproducing. So obviously they're not, doing that. But as far as Ishmael and, those different Hamite countries, yes, they still practice polygamy, So it says, so to put it simply, monogamy didn't become legal in America. It was always the only legal form of marriage, while polygamy was explicitly outlawed during the 19th century. So again, they pretty much outlawed it, man. Just like it says, they didn't want men to have multiple women because, again, if you were to leave a man on an island, with 10 women, again, he could start a nation that way, man. Literally. With those 10 women, he'd be able to have a thriving society for one man, with multiple women on one island, man, But again, Esau Edom knows exactly what he's doing, you know. But just remember, polygamy, a man having multiple women, no matter the nationality, but especially if you're an Israelite man, so-called Negro, Latino, or Native American, it's your God-given right to have as many women as you want to. Now, are we in the time to multiply wives? No. But if you have multiple women already, again, you're not doing anything wrong according to the scriptures. Fuck what Esau's talking about, fuck what his law is talking about. If you have multiple women, even if you aren't married legally, that's still your right. That's your business, So I'll just use this as an example. This is Deuteronomy chapter 21, and I'm going to start at verse 15. And it says, if a man have two wives, one beloved and the other hated, and another hated, and they have borne him children, both the beloved and the hated, and if the firstborn son be hers that was hated, then it shall be, when he shall make his sons to inherit that which he hath, that he may not make the son of the beloved firstborn before the son of the hated, which is indeed the firstborn. It says, but he shall acknowledge the son of the hated for the firstborn by giving him a double portion of all that he hath, for he is the beginning of his strength. The right of the firstborn is his. So right, man. It gives an example of if a man had two wives, he loves one, but, he hates the other. But, anything could have happened between him and that first woman, that had his first, his son, his firstborn son. He may have, just, I don't love her anymore. She's a demon, whatever, But if that woman, birth your firstborn son, you can't, give the birthright, or the inheritance, I should say, not the birthright, the inheritance to, your second son, That's just how it is. And this is a part of the law. We just went over this, the other day as well, but if a man has, children by a woman, that, again, he doesn't love anymore, he hates her, that firstborn son still gets that inheritance, and it says a double portion if he tries to do that, because no matter if you don't love that woman anymore, you still have to give your firstborn son that inheritance after you, transition and get older. That's just how it is. That's the law. But again, man, just say if a man have two wives, again, it didn't say, a man, was going off by having two wives, man. No, it's okay. A man can have as many women as he wants, So what that man did, he didn't do anything wrong according to the scriptures. Now, if he scammed those women, then yeah, he was wrong for that, but just, marrying three different women because he wanted to marry three different women, that was his business, Now, would I recommend getting legally married in today's society? No, because it's, it's too much of a hassle and it's too much that comes with it, But again, what you do with your woman and the comfort of your own home is your business, But I just wanted to go into that real quick. Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. I'm going to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who I learned this truth from. And I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. Till next time I say, Shalom.